The Japanese system to break any bad habit, Kaizen philosophy. Most people think breaking bad habits requires massive willpower and dramatic life changes. They're completely wrong. Today, I'm going to show you an ancient Japanese philosophy that makes breaking any bad habit almost effortless, and it's the exact opposite of what most self-help gurus tell you to do. But first, let me tell you about Marcus. He was 27, working as a marketing analyst at a tech startup, and he was about to lose everything because of his phone. Marcus would wake up at 6 a.m. and immediately grab his phone from under his pillow. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, emails, Slack messages. Before he even got out of bed, he'd already burned through 45 minutes. He'd scroll during breakfast, during his commute, during lunch breaks. His manager had started making comments about missed deadlines. His girlfriend complained that he wasn't present during dinner. But the worst part? He'd stay up until 2 a.m. scrolling in bed, then wake up exhausted and do it all over again. Marcus tried everything. He deleted all his social media apps on a Sunday night, feeling motivated and determined. By Tuesday afternoon, he'd reinstalled them all. He tried app blockers, but he just disabled them. He tried putting his phone across the room, but he'd get up and grab it within minutes. Each failure made him feel weaker, more addicted, more hopeless. If Marcus's story sounds familiar, if you've ever felt trapped by a habit you desperately want to break, do me a favor and hit that like button right now, because what you're about to learn changed Marcus's life completely, and it can change yours too. Then Marcus discovered something that changed everything, a philosophy that seemed almost insulting at first because the changes it recommended were so small, they seemed pointless. The Japanese have a word called Kaizen, and it literally translates to good change. But here's what makes it revolutionary. Instead of trying to make huge transformations overnight, Kaizen focuses on improvements so small, they seem almost ridiculous. We're talking about changes so tiny that your brain doesn't even register them as threatening. Here's why this matters. Your brain has a built-in alarm system called the amygdala. When you try to make big changes, this alarm system goes off and creates resistance. It's the same part of your brain that kept our ancestors alive by making them afraid of anything new or different. But with Kaizen, the changes are so small that they fly completely under the radar. This is exactly what Marcus was missing. Every time he tried to quit cold turkey, his brain went into full panic mode. The phone had become so wired into his routine that removing it completely felt like cutting off a limb. But Marcus was about to learn a different approach. Let me give you a perfect example of how this works. Say you want to stop mindlessly scrolling through social media for hours every day. The typical approach would be to delete all your apps, go cold turkey, and try to replace scrolling with something productive like reading or exercising. That's a massive change, and your brain will fight you every step of the way. The Kaizen approach is different. Instead of trying to eliminate all scrolling, you start with something absurdly small. Maybe you commit to putting your phone in another room for just 2 minutes when you first wake up. That's it, 2 minutes. It sounds almost insulting, right? Like, what's the point of just 2 minutes? This is exactly what Marcus did. On a Wednesday morning in March, he tried something new. Instead of grabbing his phone from under his pillow, he placed it on his nightstand before going to sleep. Just moved it 12 inches away. That was the entire change. The first morning, it felt strange. His hand automatically reached under the pillow and found nothing. He had to sit up slightly to grab it from the nightstand. It added maybe 3 seconds to his routine. That's all. But here's the magic. After doing this for a few days, 2 minutes becomes automatic. Your brain doesn't resist it anymore. Then you can expand it to 5 minutes, then 10. Then maybe you keep your phone in another room for the first hour you're awake. Each step feels natural because you've built up to it gradually. Marcus kept the phone on the nightstand for 5 days. By day 6, reaching for the nightstand felt completely normal, so he made his next tiny adjustment. He moved his phone to the dresser across the room. Now he had to actually get out of bed to check it. The beauty of this system is that it works with your brain instead of against it. You're not trying to force change through sheer willpower. You're creating new neural pathways slowly and sustainably. Let's look at another example. Smoking. Traditional quit smoking programs tell you to pick a day, throw away all your cigarettes, and never smoke again. The success rate for cold turkey quitting is somewhere around 3 to 5%. It's terrible. With Kaizen, you might start by delaying your first cigarette of the day by just 5 minutes. That's all. You're not trying to quit yet. You're just waiting 5 extra minutes. After a week, maybe you delay it by 10 minutes, then 15. You're gradually reshaping your routine without triggering that massive resistance response. Or maybe you start by removing just 1 cigarette from your daily routine. If you normally smoke 20 cigarettes a day, you smoke 19. It's such a small change that it doesn't feel like deprivation. But over time, these tiny reductions add up to major transformation. The key insight here is that bad habits aren't really about the specific behavior. They're about the underlying patterns and triggers. When you make gradual changes, you have time to identify these patterns and replace them with better ones. For Marcus, having his phone on the dresser meant he had to stand up to check it. And once he was standing, sometimes sometimes he'd just go to the bathroom instead, or start making coffee. The 12-foot distance created a tiny moment of friction that broke the automatic reaching pattern. After 2 weeks on the dresser, Marcus made his next move. He started putting his phone in the hallway outside his bedroom before going to sleep. Now he had to leave his room entirely to check it. Take emotional eating as another example. If you always reach for junk food when you're stressed, the conventional approach would be to ban all junk food from your house and force yourself to eat carrot sticks instead. But that creates a sense of deprivation that usually leads to binge eating later. The Kaizen method might look like this. When you feel the urge to stress eat, you commit to waiting just 1 minute before you eat anything. During that minute, you don't have to do anything special. Just wait. After a week, maybe you increase it to 2 minutes. During those extra minutes, you might start to notice what you're really feeling. Maybe you're not actually hungry. Maybe you're bored or anxious or tired. As you become more aware of these triggers, you can start introducing tiny alternative behaviors. Maybe after waiting 2 minutes, you drink a glass of water first. Then maybe you do 5 deep breaths. Each addition is small enough that it doesn't feel overwhelming. Here's what's fascinating about this approach. The changes are so gradual that you often don't notice them happening day by day. But when you look back after a few months, the transformation can be dramatic. It's like watching a plant grow. You don't see it happening in real time, but suddenly it's completely different. Marcus didn't notice the changes day by day either, but something interesting started happening. The first morning, his phone was in the hallway. He woke up at 6:15 instead of 6. He'd actually slept through his alarm by 15 minutes because he wasn't being woken up by the screen light from checking his phone at 5:30 a.m. He also noticed that getting out of bed to retrieve his phone from the hallway meant he was already up and moving. Sometimes he'd go straight to the shower instead of checking his phone. The tiny bit of extra distance was creating space for new choices. The Japanese discovered this principle because their culture values long-term thinking over quick fixes. They understand that sustainable change happens slowly and consistently, not through dramatic bursts of effort. Now let me share the specific framework you can use to apply Kaizen to any bad habit you want to break. The first step is to identify the smallest possible change you can make. And I mean really small. If it feels challenging, make it smaller. If you want to stop watching TV for hours every night, don't start by cutting out all TV. Start by turning it off during commercial breaks, or maybe just during the first commercial of each show. The second step is consistency over intensity. It's better to make a tiny change every single day than to make a big change a few times a week. Your brain learns through repetition, and consistency is what creates new neural pathways. Marcus was religious about this. Every single night, without exception, he put his phone in the hallway, even on weekends, even when he was tired, even when he was tempted to, just this once, keep it on his nightstand. The consistency was everything. The third step is to celebrate these small wins. This might sound silly, but recognition is crucial. When you successfully delay that first cigarette by 5 minutes, acknowledge it. When you put your phone in another room for 2 minutes, give yourself credit. These micro celebrations help reinforce the new behavior. The fourth step is patience with the process. Kaizen requires a fundamental shift in how you think about change. Instead of expecting dramatic results quickly, you're trusting that tiny, consistent improvements will compound over time. It's like compound interest for your habits. After a month of keeping his phone in the hallway, Marcus noticed something remarkable. He was sleeping better. He was waking up more refreshed. And most importantly, he'd started having actual mornings. He'd shower, make breakfast, sometimes even go for a quick walk before work. Things he'd never had time for when he was burning the first hour of his day in bed scrolling. His next tiny change came 6 weeks into the process. He moved his phone from the hallway to the kitchen downstairs. Now it was an entire floor away from his bedroom. Here's another powerful example of the Kaizen principle in action. Let's say you want to break the habit of staying up too late scrolling your phone in bed. The conventional approach might be to put your phone in airplane mode at 10 p.m. and force yourself to read a book instead. But for most people, this creates a lot of resistance. The Kaizen approach might start with putting your phone on the nightstand instead of under your pillow. That's it. You can still use it, but now it requires slightly more effort to reach. After this becomes automatic, maybe you move it to the dresser across the room, then maybe to the hallway outside your bedroom. Each step removes a little bit of convenience without creating a sense of deprivation. This was Marcus's exact journey, and here's what happened that he never expected. When his phone was in the kitchen downstairs, something shifted. At 11 p.m., when he'd normally be scrolling TikTok in bed, he'd think about going downstairs to get his phone, but he was already in bed, already comfortable. The stairs felt far away, and sometimes he'd just decide it wasn't worth it. Or maybe you start by switching your phone to black and white mode an hour before bed. Color screens are more stimulating to your brain, so this tiny change can make your phone less appealing without completely restricting your access to it. The genius of Kaizen is that it acknowledges human psychology. We resist big changes because they feel threatening, but we can accept small changes because they don't trigger our defense mechanisms. And once a small change becomes automatic, we can build on it. Let's talk about procrastination, which is really just a habit of avoiding important tasks. The typical advice is to break big projects into smaller chunks and tackle them with intense focus sessions. But for chronic procrastinators, even starting can feel overwhelming. With Kaizen, you might commit to working on that important project for just 2 minutes a day, not 2 hours, 2 minutes. Anyone can do anything for 2 minutes. The goal isn't to make significant progress. The goal is to establish the habit of starting. What usually happens is that once you start, momentum takes over and you end up working longer than planned. But even if you only work for exactly 2 minutes, you've succeeded. You've reinforced the habit of beginning, which is often the hardest part of any task. After 2 minutes becomes automatic, you can gradually increase it. Maybe 3 minutes, then 5, then 10. But you're always staying within what feels manageable. You're never triggering that resistance response that makes you want to avoid the task entirely. The psychological principle behind this is called the Zeigarnik effect. Once you start a task, your brain has a tendency to want to complete it, but you have to actually start first, and that's where most people get stuck. Kaizen removes the barrier to starting by making it impossibly small. Here's what's really interesting. As you practice these tiny changes, you start to build what psychologists call self-efficacy. That's basically confidence in your ability to change your behavior. Each small success builds on the previous one, creating an upward spiral of positive change. Marcus experienced this firsthand. After 3 months of gradual changes, he developed a completely new morning routine. He woke up naturally around 6 a.m. without even setting an alarm. He'd shower, make a healthy breakfast, sometimes read for 20 minutes. He didn't check his phone until he was walking out the door to work, and even then it was just a quick glance at urgent messages. His manager noticed the difference. Projects were getting done ahead of schedule. Marcus was more focused in meetings. His girlfriend noticed too. He was present during dinner, actually listening instead of mindlessly scrolling under the table. Traditional approaches to breaking bad habits often have the opposite effect. When you try to make dramatic changes and fail, it reinforces the belief that you can't change. You start to think of yourself as someone who lacks willpower or discipline. But with Kaizen, failure is almost impossible because the changes are so small. Let me give you one more example that really illustrates the power of this approach. Negative thinking patterns. If you have a habit of catastrophic thinking or constant worry, the typical advice might be to practice positive thinking or meditation for 20 minutes a day. But the Kaizen approach recognizes that changing thought patterns is one of the hardest things to do. So you might start by simply noticing one negative thought per day, not trying to change it or stop it, just noticing it. Maybe you write it down or just mentally acknowledge it. After a week of this, you might expand it to noticing 3 negative thoughts. Then maybe you start asking yourself one simple question when you notice these thoughts. Is this definitely true? You're not trying to force positive thinking. You're just introducing a tiny moment of curiosity about your automatic thoughts. Over time, this builds into a completely different relationship with your mental patterns, but it happens so gradually that it doesn't create the resistance that usually comes with trying to change how you think. The Japanese have used Kaizen not just for personal habits, but for business and manufacturing. After World War II, Japanese companies used this philosophy to gradually improve their processes until they became world leaders in quality and efficiency. What started as tiny daily improvements compounded into revolutionary changes. The same principle applies to breaking bad habits. What feels like an insignificantly small change today can lead to a completely different life in 6 months or a year. The key is trusting the process and not getting impatient for dramatic results. Marcus's final evolution came around month 4. He'd moved his phone charging station to a specific spot in his living room. He added one more tiny rule. He wouldn't bring his phone into his bedroom at all. If he needed an alarm, he'd use the old alarm clock his dad had given him years ago. The first night felt weird, almost naked without the phone nearby, but it was just one more small step in a long journey of small steps. And by this point, Marcus had learned to trust the process. One of the biggest mistakes people make when they first learn about Kaizen is still thinking too big. They hear about making small changes and they think, okay, instead of quitting smoking completely, I'll cut down from 20 cigarettes to 10. But 10 cigarettes is still a big change if you're used to 20. True Kaizen might be reducing from 20 to 19 or delaying the first cigarette by 5 minutes. The changes need to be small enough that they feel automatic within a few days. If you're still using willpower to maintain the change after a week, it's probably too big. Make it smaller. Another key principle is that Kaizen works best when it's specific and measurable. Instead of saying, I'll spend less time on social media, you might say, I'll put my phone in another room for 5 minutes after breakfast. Instead of, I'll be more positive, you might say, I'll write down one thing I'm grateful for before bed. The specificity makes it easier to track your progress and celebrate small wins. It also makes it harder for your brain to rationalize skipping the behavior. Here's something most people don't realize. The habit you're trying to break probably serves some kind of function in your life. Maybe scrolling social media helps you avoid difficult emotions. Maybe procrastination protects you from the fear of failure. Maybe smoking gives you a way to take breaks throughout the day. Kaizen gives you time to identify these underlying functions and find better ways to meet those needs. When you make gradual changes, you're not just eliminating a behavior, you're slowly replacing an entire pattern with something more beneficial. For Marcus, the phone scrolling was serving multiple functions. It was an escape from anxiety about work. It was a way to avoid thinking about deeper life questions. It was a buffer against boredom and discomfort. As he gradually reduced his phone access, he had time to find healthier ways to address these needs. He started journaling. He picked up running again. He actually talked to his girlfriend about his work stress instead of numbing it with endless scrolling. This is why crash diets don't work, but gradual lifestyle changes do. This is why throwing away all your cigarettes often leads to buying a new pack the next day, but slowly reducing them can lead to permanent change. The final piece of the Kaizen puzzle is environmental design. Instead of relying purely on willpower, you can make tiny changes to your environment that make bad habits less convenient and good habits more convenient. If you want to stop eating junk food, don't just rely on willpower to avoid it when it's sitting in your pantry. Make a tiny environmental change. Move the junk food to a high shelf where it's slightly less convenient to reach. Or better yet, just don't buy it the next time you go to the store. If you want to stop checking your phone constantly, make it slightly less convenient. Log out of social media apps so you have to type in your password each time, or turn off all non-essential notifications. These tiny changes in your environment can have a huge impact on your behavior over time. The beautiful thing about Kaizen is that it's the opposite of perfectionism. Perfectionism says you have to change everything at once or you've failed. Kaizen says any improvement, no matter how small, is valuable and worth celebrating. This philosophy can transform not just your habits, but your entire relationship with change. Instead of seeing change as something difficult and threatening, you start to see it as something natural and manageable. You stop waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect plan, and you start making small improvements right away. The compound effect of these tiny changes is remarkable. A 1% improvement every day might not seem like much, but over the course of a year, it adds up to being 37 times better. That's the mathematical power of consistent, gradual improvement. 6 months after Marcus started his Kaizen journey with that first tiny change, moving his phone from under his pillow to his nightstand, his life looked completely different. He was sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night. He had actual morning routines. His screen time had dropped from over 7 hours a day to less than 2, and most of that was work-related. His manager promoted him to senior analyst. His relationship with his girlfriend had deepened because he was actually present. He'd started running again and had signed up for a half marathon. He'd read 12 books. But here's the most remarkable part. When people asked Marcus how he broke his phone addiction, he struggled to explain it because he'd never really broken anything. He just made one tiny change, then another, each one so small it barely registered, but together they'd completely transformed his life. So here's your challenge. Pick one bad habit you want to break. Don't pick the biggest or most obvious one. Pick something manageable. Then identify the smallest possible change you can make related to that habit. Make it so small that it feels almost ridiculous. Then commit to doing that tiny thing for just 1 week. Don't worry about the long-term plan. Don't try to figure out how this small change will eventually eliminate the habit completely. Just focus on making that tiny change automatic. After a week, you can decide whether to increase it slightly or add another small change. And to help you get started, I've created a one-page Kaizen action plan that breaks down everything you need to implement this strategy for your specific habit. It includes a step-by-step framework examples for common habits, and a tracking system to measure your tiny daily improvements. To get your free copy, simply text the word Kaizen to 325-378-6868 and you'll receive the complete action plan within minutes. Remember, the goal isn't to transform your life overnight. The goal is to start a process of gradual improvement that can continue for months or years. Every single day you practice this tiny change, you're rewiring your brain and building new neural pathways. The Japanese understood something that Western culture often misses. True change doesn't happen through force or dramatic effort. It happens through patience, consistency, and respect for the natural pace of human adaptation. When you work with your brain instead of against it, breaking bad habits becomes not just possible, but almost inevitable. That's the power of Kaizen. It takes the struggle out of change and replaces it with a gentle, sustainable process that actually works. Instead of fighting against your habits with willpower, you're strategically outmaneuvering them with patience and persistence. Marcus learned this the hard way after years of failed attempts. But once he discovered Kaizen, everything changed. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually, steadily, inevitably. And that same transformation is available to you, starting with one tiny change today. If you found value in this video, you're going to love what we explore here at Silent CEO Wisdom. This channel is inspired by the honor of samurai masters, the clarity of stoic thinkers, and the unwavering faith of great biblical figures. We're on a journey into timeless knowledge and life mastery. Here, we explore the silence that empowers, the presence that guides, and the wisdom that transforms. Through profound reflections, ancient teachings, and practical life strategies, we cultivate courage, discipline, and purpose. If you're ready to sharpen your mind, strengthen your spirit, and live intentionally, subscribe to this channel and check out the video I'm recommending next. It's another powerful lesson based on the Silent CEO method that will help you unlock the wisdom that leads to true self-mastery. Thank you for watching, and remember, every master was once a beginner who refused to quit.